It's a blue Monday right here. It's a chilly day in Johannesburg today. It's going to get a little bit warmer, but we're expecting rain here. Jumbo Africa. We'll be with you until 12 o'clock today. Now today, 3 family members have been shot and killed by unknown assailants at Folweni, south of Durban over the weekend. Now, as you can recall, this is the 3rd attack on families in KZN in the past weekend.
No, it's atrocious. The killings have just been rising over the last few weeks, and we want to find out from you, what could be the motive behind the rise in killings in KwaZulu-Natal?
First, there was a thinking that it could be political killings, but it's much more than that now, it seems.
This entire family is being wiped out in one night. Every 2-3 days, we're hearing about 3 people killed in one family, 8 people killed. It's absolutely scary and shocking.
Let's find out from you what you are telling us. What could be the motives behind this? Atini Mabena says, cadre deployment is the major problem. At least those who are in government must have master's degrees and PhDs. What he's trying to tell us is that currently you don't need any education to become a councillor, and therefore people are killing each other for those positions.
Absolutely. Collins Telele says corruption propelled by power-hungry politicians is the reason. Police ministry should offer rewards to those with information about the killers.
Now, those are your comments. We'll await them. We'll also try and speak to an analyst on the issue to find out what is happening in KZN. But another important story, the public protector is in the hot seat today in Parliament. Now, this follows her recommendations to, of course, the DA saying that the public protector overstepped a mark and sacrificed the independence when she consulted the presidency, as well as the security agency, a state security agency, on remedial action was recommended for ABSA and Bancorp.
Which has all brought into question her fitness to hold office for some people. And we're asking you, should the public protector continue to hold office?
Well, 69% Kendall are saying no. They don't have any confidence in the public protector. Only 31% are saying yes. 168 votes in, you can still do so. Let us know what's on your mind.
Yeah, let's see what's being said on social media. Squeezeballs comes in with, she's not the right fit for the job, period. Mahafa Noel says, I don't have confidence in her anymore. Well, do you or don't you? Please let us know. But it was also a sporting weekend of note for South Africans across all 3 sporting codes, rugby, soccer, as well as cricket. And then, of course, we know what happened. We know what happened. And after the hullabaloo we created on Thursday and Friday, and then we come to Monday morning and we've got the results that we've got. A much improved performance by all 3, I must say.
Fantastic performance by Bafana. I could not believe it. I thought it was a different team playing.
Yeah.
The same with the Springboks. I mean, from 57-0 to 1 point difference.
24-25, phenomenal stuff.
And we could have won that match, by the way.
Could have won that match had it not been for one indiscretion by one of the players. But having said that, the Proteas also finished their test in 2.5 days. So what are your views from these great performances over the weekend? Lechasa Molla says, well done, Springbok.
This one coming from Desley says, not again, Springboks. The team must improve big time. If you want to be #1, you must beat #1. Well, Leslie, I tell you what, we probably won that match if it wasn't for that one indiscretion.
Yeah, but a win is a win and a loss is a loss. Having said that, keep them coming. We want to see what you've got to say about the Proteas as well as Bafana Bafana. Bafana Bafana definitely putting in a really good shift over the weekend.
And what about the Proteas? Of course,
Kagiso Rabada. Phenomenal.
Fantastic performance.
Fantastic talent.
Yeah. Well, there you have it. Let's take a look at your headlines right now. Retired Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke says his role as arbiter in the Life Esidimeni hearing is to determine an appropriate redress for the family. Our top story this morning, 3 family members were shot and killed last night by unknown assailants at Folweni, south of Durban. This is the 3rd attack on families in KwaZulu-Natal in a week. And the North Gauteng High Court is expected to rule today whether India's Bank of Baroda can close the accounts of 20 companies belonging to the controversial Gupta family. Those are your headlines. Before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front.
Elvis, it's a Monday morning that I'm happy to be alive on. Great news coming out on all fronts in South African sports. So, yeah, it's a good Monday. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
Yes, Dumela Mahaichu. This is what we've got for you in the sports today. Here we go.
What a catch, and that's 100 test wickets for Kagiso Rabada.
22-year-old Kagiso Rabada's star continues to rise as he seals a resounding 2-0 test series victory for the Proteas over Bangladesh with his third 10-wicket haul.
Youngest South African to 100 test wickets and the 5th youngest in world cricket. Take a bow, young man.
Onside here, needing support, lovely play, Vilagasi to make it 3, and in added time, South Africa rubbing salt in the Burkinabe wound.
Bafana wrest back control of their World Cup 2018 destiny with a masterful 3-1 victory over the Stallions of Burkina Faso.
The All Blacks are giving an inch, Springboks are still going strong, and Gupta!
The Springboks put in a much improved performance to lose by a single point to the mighty All Blacks in their last Rugby Championship match for 2017. All this and more we've got for you later on. Do stay with Elvis as he's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Retired Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke says that his role as an arbitrator in the Life Esidimeni hearing is to determine an appropriate redress for the families. Over 100 psychiatric patients died at unlicensed NGOs after the Gauteng Health Department terminated its contract with Life Esidimeni about 2 years ago. The 3-week hearings will be held in Parktown in Johannesburg. Justice Moseneke says so far 64 out of the 110 families have agreed to participate in the arbitration process. For the latest on that story, our SABC reporter Griselda Lewis is there. A very good morning to you, Griselda, and welcome. Can you tell us the hearings will start today? What can we expect?
Well, that's right, Elvis. The Life Esidimeni arbitration process begins here in Johannesburg this morning, as per the recommendations of the Health Ombudsman, to look at what really happened and what led to the deaths of those more than 100 mentally ill patients. You'd know that this process was also set up to look at what redress or compensation will be given to the families of the victims. So over the next 3 weeks, we're really expecting to hear from the families firsthand about what their experiences and what impact the deaths of their loved ones have had on their lives. You'd also recall that one of the recommendations that the Health Ombudsman had also made was that there should be an unconditional apology given to the families of the victims as well as the survivors. But I think the main question to ask at this point, Elvis, is that while they try to look at redress and possible compensation for the families of those victims, the mammoth task that the arbitrators led by the retired Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke really will have, the challenge they will have is to try and see how do you really put the value on the cost of human life. That's the big pertinent question that is going to be asked here over the next 3 weeks. But I think also one of the main issues for the families over the past couple of months, you'd recall as well, while there was an array of suspensions, including the resignation of the former health MEC, you'd know that no arrests have yet been made relating to this tragedy. You recall, of course, that an array of suspensions included the entire members of the Mental Health Review Board, and the families are certainly saying that while there are no questions or there are no answers to the many questions that they have, perhaps these public hearings would shed more light on what led to the deaths of their loved ones. And I think this is certainly a step in the right direction in terms of, if you look at when the families do get to hear perhaps what happened, this would be a step in the right direction in terms of the closure that these families have been looking for, Elvis.
Now, why are there only 64 out of the 110 families that have agreed to participate in this arbitration process? Do we know at this stage?
All of that, Elvis, will certainly come to light once these hearings do get underway. But I'm sure you can imagine what a difficult time it has been for the families of these victims. As we've been speaking to them together with my colleague Mangoba Mchunu over the past couple of months, you can really still tell how fresh the wounds of these families are. And they're really hoping that this process will really be able to shed some light on what really happened to their loved ones. As you heard from the retired Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke. This process is really to try and establish all of that and to give these families some kind of closure and looking at redress and compensation as well. But I did mention earlier as well, Elvis, that the pertinent question here to ask is that how do you place value on the cost of human life? So at the end of the day, after these 3-week hearings are completed, the arbitrator will really need to decide what is would be acceptable for these family members while their loved ones may never come back again. And you know that the state has taken full responsibility for what has happened. These families are saying that it's very difficult for them to participate in these hearings. And this is really where, Elvis, we will really get the raw details from these families on how they've been managing, if they've been coping at all since this tragedy took place. And I think most of all, they would want to see more justice. They've been calling for that since the report of the health ombudsman was released. They were saying it's all good and well that the state has taken responsibility for what has happened, but they want to see justice. They want to see more heads roll. They want to see people arrested who were responsible for this tragedy.
What time will the hearing commence this morning, Griselda, and what can we expect to happen first?
Well, the hearings will begin at 9:30 this morning. Many of those who will be participating and listening in as well have already arrived here at the Emoyeni Conference Centre. We're yet to get details about what's expected to happen first, but I would presume at this point that they would really want to engage the affected families on how all of this process has been for them since this tragedy struck, and to get those raw details from them on what really they're expecting or what perhaps they would want this arbitration process to achieve at the end of the day. But certainly, as I did indicate, closure is something that these families are all wanting from the end of this process in the next 3 weeks.
Griselda Lewis, thank you so much for that update. Commencing at 9:30, we'll go there live as soon as we got that. That was our SABC reporter, Griselda Lewis, live just here around the corner in Parktown. Continuing now, another big story for us in focus is the 3 family members that have been shot and killed last night by unknown assailants at Fulweni, south of Durban. Now, this is the 3rd attack on families in KwaZulu-Natal in a week. The families were traveling on the M35 when they were attacked from behind by suspects traveling in 2 cars. Other occupants of the car sustained serious injuries and were rushed to a nearby hospital. The motive for this attack is unknown. Meanwhile, 4 suspects have been arrested in connection with the murders of 5 people in Marion Hill, west of Durban. Some of the victims were handcuffed before being shot execution style. Police say an operation involving organized crime detectives and team members and local detectives brought positive results. And that's why we're asking you this question this morning, a very important one, because we'd like to get behind the scenes and perhaps know what is going on in KZN. Why do we see the killings in KZN, and what could be the motive behind the rise in these killings there? Let me know what's on your mind. We'll take a look at some of your comments in a short while in relation to that on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on our Facebook page. Meanwhile, the North Gauteng High Court is expected to rule today whether India's Bank of Baroda can close the accounts of 20 companies belonging to the controversial Gupta family. The Indian-based financial institution intends cutting ties with the Gupta-linked companies, joining the ranks of several firms, including South Africa's 4 biggest banks, that are distancing themselves from business associates of President Jacob Zuma. The anti-corruption unit has accused the Gupta family of using their close relationship with the president to influence political decisions and win business rather. Both the president and the Guptas have denied any wrongdoing. The Guptas have not been charged with any crime. Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Justice will discuss the public protector, Busisiwe Mkhwebani's fitness to hold office this week. The unprecedented move comes barely a year after she took up the post. Chairperson of the committee, Matolo Mochecha, says that they will deal with the DA's request to institute proceedings intended to remove her from office. The DA says Mkhwebani has sacrificed her independence when she consulted with the presidency and the State Security Agency on the remedial action to be recommended in the ABSA Bancorp report. And that is why we're asking you this question on our poll this morning, looking at that, and should the public protector continue to hold office? There you have it on your screen right now. 168 votes in, 69% of you in South Africa and on the African continent are suggesting no, she should not hold office. 29% are suggesting that she should continue. I'll read some of those comments also in a short while. Meanwhile, President Jacob Zuma will officially open the 5th ordinary session of the 4th Pan-African Parliament in Midrand. It will be the PAP's last session for the year. Female genital mutilation will be under the spotlight.
As the Pan-African Parliament resumes, women from across the continent will meet parliamentarians and non-governmental organizations to discuss laws relating to women's rights, with particular emphasis on female genital mutilation.
It will focus on looking at the progress on ratifying these legal instruments, especially those that relate to women's rights, to the rights of the youth, and also those that are likely to impact the matters relating to FGM, female genital mutilation.
Resolutions of the Pan-African Parliament are submitted to the AU General Assembly of Heads of State and Government that meets in January and June. As final preparations get underway for what is supposed to be the next session of the Pan-African Parliament, it looks like governments and the peoples of the continent still have a long way to go to understand the role of this body.
We still have a lot of work to do in terms of visibility. We still have a lot of work to do in terms of demonstrating our mandate. And we also have a lot of work to do in terms of getting the member states to ratify the protocol that establishes the Pan-African Parliament.
The Pan-African Parliament meets 4 times a year. President Jacob Zuma is among heads of state expected to address some sessions of the upcoming sitting. Ntakwana Ngatani, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Let's now go live to the event. Ntakwana Ngatani joins us live from the Parliament in Midrand for more. Very good morning to you, Ngatani, and welcome. Tell us what is happening there today.
Good morning, Elvis. Yes, we come to you live from the Pan-African Parliament here in Midrand. And as you've heard in that piece that you saw, Africans, governments, the peoples of the continent still have a long way to go to really understand what the Pan-African Parliament is all about. But what I can tell you from what I've seen here this morning is that I've seen the oneness, I've seen the beauty, I've seen the creativity of Africa. And when you come to the Pan-African Parliament, you get a sense that Africa can speak with one voice. One of the things that we expect this seating to do is to look at the Africa position regarding the Cotonou Agreement, and that's a major trade agreement, and to speak with one voice when it goes to the EU to talk about Africa-EU relations. The other thing that's expected to come out of this seating is the issue of the youth, particularly young women. As you heard there, the clerk of the Pan-African Parliament saying that one of the issues that this particular seating is expected to do is hold a conference with women from all walks of life from across the continent, from the NGO sector, from the governmental sector, but particularly these members of parliament who are gathered here today. And they will discuss laws across the continent that need to be ratified, laws that need to be implemented to ensure that no women on this continent, the African continent, go through female genital mutilation. And that is a big problem because as we speak at the moment, more than 200 million women all over the world apparently have now been mutilated or cut. And if the trend continues, we expect that 86 million more women will be mutilated by the year 2030. So Africa trying to reverse some of these injustices that are currently going on. And one of the things that we have now found out is that Egypt is one of the countries that has the highest number of mutilations at about 27 million women. And when we look at how many women per country and that is prevalence of female mutilation. It is Somalia that is the highest. But let us start first and talk about the Pan-African Parliament. This power that I'm talking about, that I'm saying Africa has to come together, to unite, to face the world as a united front. And here with me now is Ntsiwa Sikete, who is the Manager of Communications for the Pan-African Parliament. Now, Ntsiwa, for an ordinary African like me, who has never been to the Pan-African Parliament, who's never heard of the Pan-African Parliament, what is it? What is it supposed to do?
Thank you very much, Takwana. The Pan-African Parliament is a continental parliament. It's a legislative organ of the African Union. It was established way back in 2004, and it has been sitting in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, for the first 5 years until the Republic of South Africa took over as a host. That is why we are here in Midrand today. And the main work of the PAP, as we call it, I just said it's a legislative organ. We are supposed to make the laws for the continent, as you rightly pointed in your introduction. But as things stand now, we are unable to make those laws for the continent. We can only advise countries. We can only provide some oversight of what the African Union or the organs of the African Union are doing for the continent. And we also act as a consultative body for the continent. As things stand, the Pan-African Parliament is only able to do model laws that it proposes to countries to try and work together in harmony and try to do things in a similar fashion from the north to the south. Maybe I will not go that much into what or which model laws have we done so far, but there's one on policing that the PAP is currently working on. Yes.
Now let's talk about the sittings of this parliament. It sits 4 times a year. It has 5 members of parliament from each member state of the African Union. And when it sits, it talks about, as you say, laws that are recommended to countries. And as it stands now, we understand that one of the things that the Parliament will talk about in this particular sitting is Africa's position on the Africa-European Union, or rather Africa-Europe relations in terms of trade. But when it comes to, if you call it the separation, where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line between the different member states' parliaments in terms of what they're supposed to do with the laws and the Pan-African Parliament?
The trick is, at the moment, we are the Parliament of Africa, but we are not able to force any country to do whatever the MPs agree on when they come here to meet. What we are hoping is that the MPs themselves are able to convince their different countries that these are the critical issues that the parliaments should be working towards. We have 5 regions. They work in their different blocks, and they agree on what to take and what not to take. The Pan-African Parliament is not here to take the sovereignty of countries. Countries decide on their own. But when they meet here, when they elect and they nominate their representatives, the hope is that they come, they share experiences, and they try to find a common position towards certain areas that they will be working on. So it's still tricky for now. I think this takes us to the issue of the full mandate that the Pan-African Parliament should be having. We are not able to force anyone or to force any country, to force any laws on any country, because now we still have only 5 countries which have ratified the protocol that gives the Pan-African Parliament the full powers. And these countries are Togo, Mali, the Gambia, Sahrawi, and Sierra Leone. And if you look at when were when did they do, or when did they actually ratify? It was just recently. It shows that there's still a lot of work that the heads of state have to do. There's a lot of work that the members of parliament that come to the Pan-African Parliament have to do. When they get back to the country, what do they report to the people? So I think you understand what I'm trying to...
I hear you. Now, let's talk about this particular sitting now.
Yes.
What are the highlights? Who are we expecting to see? We know that President Jacob Zuma is expected to show himself here at some point in one of the sessions. We know that the president of Sahrawi, a country that some say is still not independent, but that the African Union recognizes as an independent state, is also supposed to deliver a keynote address at the opening session. What can we expect to find at the session this time around?
Well, I think you have just said it. We are expecting the president of Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic as the keynote speaker or a guest of honor. And one interesting thing is that Sahrawi is a small country that still has issues maybe with other Morocco, and it has its own issues in the region. It has actually ratified the PAP protocol, meaning Sahrawi is looking forward to seeing the Pan-African Parliament having the full powers. Apart from that, the president of Chad has delegated to the Speaker of the National Assembly, who will address the National Parliament. The aim or the objective is actually to hear from the heads of state. Are they still agreeing? Are they still interested in seeing the Pan-African Parliament having full powers? What do they say to the MPs? What do they say to other heads of state and government? That is the key thing.
Thank you, Nsiwa. That is Nsiwa Sekete. She is the manager communications for the Pan-African Parliament. Now, one of the things that we expect to see here today is the swearing in of new members of the Pan-African Parliament, because 7 countries have gone through elections since the last sitting, and 35 members of Parliament from 5 from each of the 7 countries will be sworn in as new members of the Pan-African Parliament. And that, by the way, includes my country, Lesotho. So as we go back into the chamber, it's back to you in studio.
There we have it. That's our reporter at the PAP, Ndakwane Ngetane. Now, the Democratic Alliance marched to the Gupta's family or private residence in Saxonwold last week, Thursday. Now, the march came a day after the unveiling of a monument of the President Jacob Zuma at Groot Marico, where the opposition party has also staged a protest. The Gupta family had earlier threatened to obtain an urgent interdict to halt a planned march by the DA to the family's compound in Saxonwold. Meanwhile, over the weekend, the DA held a provincial conference in the Western Cape, where a new leader, Bonginkosi Madikizela, was elected. Now, to talk to us about this and more about the DA, we're joined by the DA's Chief Whip, John Steenhuisen. A very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Good morning to you. It's great for the opportunity to be here with you this morning.
Tell us about the Western Cape Provincial Conference. How did it go?
Well, I think it went very, very well, and I think if one contrasts the orderliness, the expertise with which it was executed with what happened in the Eastern Cape at the ANC's Provincial Congress under a fortnight ago, I think you can see the chalk and cheese difference between the DA and the ANC. A peaceful, well-accredited conference, which has achieved a result now that is decisive. And we now have an elected leader in the Western Cape, Mr. Bonginkosi Madikizela, as well as Chairperson Anton Bradell and their PEC. And their job now is to get on with the business of preparing the party on the ground here in the Western Cape for the upcoming 2019 elections.
Now, in his election speech, Bonginkosi Madikizela spoke about the DA being united after the run-up to the conference, which of course saw a lot of contestations in the run-up to that conference, even between the mayor as well as a mayoral candidate. Talk to us about that. Is there unity within the Democratic Alliance, especially in the Western Cape?
Well, I certainly think there is unity. Are there differences of opinion? Are there differences in approaches? Absolutely. but I would regard these as a natural process within any political party and certainly any organization. You're going to always have people who've got different opinions and different ideas about ways things should be done, but this doesn't necessarily have to result in people being hurled with chairs and all sorts of other things. We have ways of resolving these differences and ways of getting around these problems, and they generally involve a peaceful process, and a process that ultimately results in the voters being put first rather than the political party being placed first.
A peaceful process, but there was also some controversy. The DA leader, Mmusi Maimane, spoke about leaders and racial tendencies. Tell us more about that, and why was that the case?
Well, I think we've seen a lot of external racial epithets, etc., being thrown into the mix, I think, by parties like Black First, Land First, external commentators who are trying to always create a race narrative. Race still plays a very big part in the South African political dynamic, and it's going to for a while to come. But I think what we need to do is to ensure that as political leaders, wherever we serve, that we're finding ways to promote reconciliation, redress, and ensuring that we have a diversity of results when these results are announced. And I think that the Western Cape Congress this last weekend has been a model of achieving both that unity and that diversity.
Now, both the mayor as well as the mayoral member were suspended from party activities. Where is the case currently, and can they continue with their jobs?
Well, obviously, they've been taken special leave from their party responsibilities, but they continue with their work at the coalface of service delivery in the city of Cape Town, both as mayor and as a MACO member. The party has currently a process underway that's looking at the tensions between the two, as well as any other tensions that may have arisen in that City of Cape Town caucus. I'm chairing that process. We've still got a number of interviews to undertake, and I've no doubt we'll have a successful conclusion of that process within certainly the next 10 days.
Let's now move on to the marches. The DA, well, they marched through the compound of the Guptas here in Johannesburg. The question is, what was the DA hoping to achieve with that particular march?
Well, I think that what we were trying to show is that whilst the Jacob Zuma capture site was being unveiled in Groot Marico, our point was that the real site of capture of President Zuma was actually at the Embassy of State Capture, and that's the Gupta home in Saxonwold. That home is unique because it features quite prominently in the Public Protector's report into state capture as a nexus of where government ministers, well-connected political individuals converged to plan the process of state capture in South Africa. We believe it is the real capture site of the ANC and of the president, and we want to protest at the very slow pace with which the public figures particularly are being dealt with in terms of those implicated in state capture. We've seen KPMG, we've seen Trillion, we've seen a whole lot of private sector heads roll. What we're yet to see is a single politician take responsibility and take the fall for this project of state capture that has been embarked upon by so many members of the President's cabinet.
Although you call it the Embassy of State Capture, don't you think, though, that you endangered the Gupta family, their safety during that march to their compound?
I certainly don't think that's the case. And if anyone had seen the security that's present there and has been present there for years, I think that that would be a bit of a stretch of the imagination. But what we did do is protest outside peacefully. No property was damaged, nobody was insulted or assaulted, but it certainly wanted to make the point that we in South Africa, whatever our political persuasion, need to work hard to root out the scourge of state capture and hold both those who are involved in the capture, like the Gupta family, and those who have been captured, like the various ministers. They need to be held accountable, and their feet need to start being held to the fire. And we need to start seeing some serious political heads rolling for this particular incident of state capture, which has robbed so much from the people of South Africa.
We have seen a number of companies implicated. You've mentioned KPMG, Trillion and so forth. But the question then is, why have you not, as the DA, laid criminal charges against the Guptas if they are the state capture site, as you call it earlier?
My understanding is we have laid charges against the Guptas and various other people involved in state capture. We've also laid charges against those in both Eskom, KPMG and other institutions who we believe have fallen foul of the Prevention and Combating of Criminal Activities Act, as well as various sections of the PFMA. But I think what's very interesting to note is that whilst, as I've said, private sector heads are falling, none of the public sector heads are coming off that guillotine. And if we continue with this accountability gap in South Africa and continue to hold politicians to a different standard to which we hold and expect private institutions to be held, then we're simply going to create even more fertile ground for politicians to continue wholesale plunder of the public purse and rob South Africans of even more opportunity and money going forward.
We've seen schisms within the tripartite alliance. We know what's currently happening with some of the state-owned entities as well. That's falling apart in relation to state capture. But there are those that are suggesting that opposition parties are not taking control or perhaps advantage of the fact that there's schisms within the ruling party. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think that's an accurate or fair analysis at all. And I think if one looks just over a month ago, probably one of the most profound events in recent history was the vote of no confidence in the President of the Republic in this very Parliament, where over 40 government members on their benches broke ranks, defied the whip, and voted for the removal of President Jacob Zuma. That is certainly a profound event. We have continued wherever we can to take advantage of the infighting within the ANC, and we see it played out here on a virtual daily basis in Parliament, in the committee rooms, in the ANC caucus rooms, committee chairpersons being removed, ANC members fighting ANC members in portfolio committees as we try to get to the bottom of state capture and to hold those responsible accountable. So I don't think that is a fair or accurate analysis at all, particularly if one looks at what has happened over the course of the last 3 months particularly. 2019
is around the corner. National elections. Your chances as the Democratic Alliance, seeing that you have a new leadership in the Western Cape right now and changes within the DA?
Well, we're very positive, and what we want to do is to ensure that where we govern, we show the demonstrable difference between what life is like under an ANC government and what life is like under a DA government. And that's why the 3 municipalities, metropolitan municipalities, particularly where we are in government, in coalition, where in the Western Cape, which we govern, and the city of Cape Town, which we govern, that we make sure that South Africans are getting the service delivery that they need, that we start to create jobs, and that we start to move those economies forward so that we can gain the trust of ordinary South Africans as we head into 2019. So that ordinary South Africans can see that the power of their vote can bring change, it can bring hope, and it can bring a new prosperous future for both them and their families.
Well, Mr. Steenhuisen, all the best of luck, and thank you so much for joining us in our parliamentary studios.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
That was the DA Chief Whip, John Steenhuisen, talking to us all about things, politics within the Democratic Alliance. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back after that. Stay tuned.
ANC presidential candidate Lindiwe Sisulu says that she is not running her presidential campaign based on slates. Sisulu says that ANC branch members should be able to choose who their leader is without the pressure of slates. SABC News spoke to Sisulu.
I am a candidate for the presidency of the ANC, whose conference will be held in December. The fact that I am a female is a matter of my biological definition, but otherwise I am standing as a candidate for the presidency.
So this phenomenon of female president, you're not trying to ride on that?
I'm not trying to ride on that, except that I am biased towards women because I feel that the ANC can be proud of the fact that it now has females who can run for presidency.
Okay.
And it speaks very well of the grooming within the ANC. It speaks very well of the capacity of the ANC.
So if I were a delegate who is a feminist and wants to vote for a female through and through, why should I vote for you?
Why would you vote for me? First of all, I think anybody who goes to the conference would have worked out what it is that they want out of the ANC emerging from the conference. One, they would want an ANC that can revive itself, an ANC that would be attractive to people to rejoin. We've lost a lot of people along the way. An ANC that will definitely be able to take them to the 2019 election and win. That's what they would be looking for. They'd be looking for somebody who they can trust. They would be looking for somebody who is tried and tested cadre of the ANC. They'd be looking for somebody whose hard work and commitment to the ANC has borne fruit and can be tangible and seen. They'll be looking for somebody who would never, ever betray those sacred values of the ANC.
Now,
that's what they would be looking for.
Now, why should they not vote for Baleka Mbete or Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma?
Well, I'm not here to campaign for myself. It's just a philosophy of the ANC that we don't go out and campaign. All I'm saying is I'm standing, and all I'm saying is I would be able to do the job that would be placed on me if they choose me. I would not be speaking, denigrating any of the other candidates that I am better than they are. It actually would be very wrong. We call this a campaign simply because we have no other way of coining it. Okay. But otherwise, it is people who are putting themselves out there to say, I'm ready to serve in whatever capacity. And so far, there are 3 of us. And women out there, or whoever it is, will be spoiled for choice who to choose.
So who's on your slate?
I've taken a deliberate decision that I am standing on my own credentials. I am not leaning on anybody. I don't have a slate. I don't believe in slates. I am not in a faction. I actually believe that the reason we had such a terrible conference in Bulugwane is because of these factions. We still have factions right now going to the 2017 election. That's wrong, very wrong. I'm standing on my own credentials. I think that I want to give South Africans a different perspective of how to actually go to a conference and still win, and go beyond the conference without losing anybody. My job is to make sure that we keep the ANC in the same format it was when we received it, a very united ANC, an ANC that had one vision, an ANC that had one aim and determination to free the people of South Africa. We've made a promise to the people of South Africa in 1994 that we would give them a better life. We still owe them that better life because possibly 30 or so million of them still live in poverty. We have a long way to go, and I'm putting myself up on those reasons, not against anybody.
So in your analogy, who has to take responsibility for the state of the current ANC?
Well, the ANC right now is in an unfortunate situation. When Comrade Gwede, as the SG, wrote the diagnostic report at the conference, we all hung our heads in shame because in all honesty, what he was saying to us from that report is true. The ANC is in crisis. You can see even the reverberations of this crisis in the killings in KwaZulu-Natal, in a whole lot of other things that are happening. You can see also from the way that the media on a daily basis has a case of corruption or a case of mismanagement here or there. We are the ruling party and we should take responsibility for that. Right from the beginning, right from the helm down, a president plays a pivotal role in the direction that any organization takes.
Now, when your candidacy was announced,
Yes.
post the clip down meeting,
yes,
Twitter went abuzz. People saying Lindiwe is taking us for fools. She's the one who made sure that Jacob Zuma is not charged in 2009. She made sure that the charges are withdrawn. She has now found this new conscience which she wants us to buy in. Kudlalwa ngathi, that was the hashtag. Now, let's talk about that. You were part of the people who made sure that the President Zuma doesn't go or doesn't face those charges at the time. Then yet today, you're saying we must do something with this president.
Okay. Mpo, when I first met you, you played a pivotal role in making sure that we can educate South Africans about the issue of housing. You're here now.
Yeah.
Right. It means you have grown. You've grown from when I met you.
Yeah.
You now occupy this particular position. Your perspectives grow. Your mind widens. I cannot expect you to have been stuck in the role you were in when I met you. Yeah. So I don't know what you're talking about. Not unless you're expecting me to be morphed in the views that I had a few years ago. I've learned a lot. I have grown a lot in also my analysis. And I've come to a point where I think that in choosing a new leader for the ANC, a number of things which we might have omitted in the past need to be brought to the fore. I think that those people who are saying that because I defended Jacob Zuma, I'm making them a fool, are saying the million people who voted for the ANC in the last election are also fools, and they're not. They're also saying that the entire ANC, which chose me as to lead that particular committee, are fools. What I did was, given that responsibility by the NEC, I applied my mind, I applied every moment of my time, like I do with everything I do. We looked into the allegations against Comrade Zuma. We explained to the NEC what it is that the allegations were pointing to, and we assisted the ANC to understand Jacob Zuma's case. And I am very proud of the work that I did because I understood the law better, I understood the cases better, I was able to explain to the ANC. The ANC took a decision on their own in a meeting about what stand we should take. So I was an enabler of unpacking the charges and understanding what they are. I wasn't out there saying, let's go free Zuma from behind the bars. Okay. No.
What do you regret?
What do I regret? Oh, no, I don't regret anything. I have grown, and I don't regret growing. I am here, I am now. I've learned a lot, and I've learned things that we could have done better. I've learned things that we have done wrong. I have learned, too, that it is very painful to lose an election like we did in 2016. I've learned that it's not going to happen ever again because we owe our people those metros that belong to them. They're vital metros. Okay. I regret that the ANC has lost some of its popularity. I regret that you're sitting there now saying that I defended Zuma and now I've changed my mind. I regret a whole lot of things that might have happened. But each one of them, everything that I come across has made me a better person. Everything that you've experienced, you've learned from, and it has made you a better person.
Lindiwe Sisulu. There you have it. It's our focus point, of course, on the leaders in the run-up to the elective conference in December, that we focus on the leadership battles. You can recall that the SG of the ANC called this a stampede. 7 people are running for the head, to be the head of the African National Congress come December, and we'll focus on all of them. So far, we had 2. All right, now it's time to take a look at your weather forecast.
Much gratitude and warm welcome. Let's take a look at your weather details. On our satellite image, you're seeing lots of clouds situated over the interior of Angola and the northern parts, the far southern parts of DRC, a band moving through to the interior of Botswana, and some clouds finding their way over the interior of South Africa. Connected with the cold front, we are expecting up to 80% chance of thunder showers over the coastal regions of Eastern Cape and the interior of Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga, and the southern parts of Limpopo. Otherwise, do expect 60% chance of thunder showers over the northern parts to the eastern parts of South Africa, then isolated to partly cloudy skies over most parts of South Africa. Over Zambia, we are expecting 30% chance of showers, and Zimbabwe as well. Over the interior of Angola, up to 60% chance of thunder showers forecast for today. Partly cloudy skies can be expected over most parts of SADC, and tomorrow, still expecting similar conditions. 80% chance of thunder showers along the coastal regions of Eastern Cape to KwaZulu-Natal. Otherwise, 60, then isolated, but Gauteng will remain partly cloudy and clear over the interior of South Africa and most parts of Namibia. But over the interior of Botswana, isolated thunder showers forecast for tomorrow. Today, our temperatures will be at a maximum of 27 degrees in Pretoria and in Limpopo, Gauteng, Mpumalanga, and the northern parts of Northwest. We do have a watch of severe thunderstorms, so please do take note of that and keep your cars safe if you are in those areas. Over the northern parts of Eastern Cape for today, we have heavy falls that may lead to localized flooding, something to note as well, and be very careful if you will be driving in those regions. Komani at a maximum of 11 degrees and 12 for Sutherland. Cape Town will be at 19 and clear skies forecast. Uppington sitting at a maximum of 21. Bloemfontein at a maximum of 23. 30% chance of thunder showers forecast over the interior of Free State. If you will be in Windhoek, a maximum of 25 with clear skies. Lutherits sitting at 21. Over the interior of Botswana, up to 30% chance of thunder showers forecast for today. Gaborone at a maximum of 31 and 23 in Francistown. Bulawayo sitting at 30 and 26 for Beira. Maputo at a maximum of 27 over Madagascar. We're still expecting very isolated showers along the coastal regions. Moroni at a maximum of 30 and 26 for Port Louis. If you are in the interior, DRC, 30 to 60% chance of thunder showers going to the interior of Angola. Luanda at 27, Lusaka 34, Lilongwe sitting at 31, and if you are in Nairobi, a maximum of 27. Very hot temperatures in Juba at a maximum of 37 degrees. Over the northern parts, the Sahara Desert expected to be clear, but over the interior of Morocco, 30% chance of thunder showers can be expected for today, and over the southern parts along the coastal regions, up to 60% chance of thunder showers. That is all. Ndawiyandu.
The Pan-African Parliament, as a legislative body, could go a long way in continuing to promote women's rights in all African member states.
Moon will be elected president. A decisive win by him will provide much-needed stability in South Korea.
The Deputy President and the SADC Oversight Committee have been mandated to convene a multi-stakeholder national dialogue before elections.
5 teams are trapped in the relegation mud. These include Bloemfontein Celtic, 12th on the log, followed by Chipa United, Free State Stars and Baroka, who are second from the bottom, as well as Highlands Park, who have won only 4 matches.
We're on point with breaking stories, detailed economy and sport. Tune into Midday Report every Monday to Friday from 12 p.m.
Hello and a warm welcome to PM News, and we're broadcasting live from Johannesburg.
4 decades later, the family is still seeking closure.
We need the truth, and the truth must be told.
Children often go undiagnosed because they are hidden away. About 1 million people in South Africa live with autism.
Creative recycling at play.
Mosaic has been around forever. I just had to find a new, fresh way to put and a new spin to put on it. So I decided, why not recycled cans?
Stay tuned to PM News for all your news updates every Saturday and Sunday from 1500 hours.
constantly moving, constantly changing. The Alexandria dune field system is extremely dynamic, with sand being continually blown in, building up and traversing inland. Some 375,000 cubic tons of sand is deposited into the dune fields each year. It's the largest and least degraded coastal dune field in the southern hemisphere.
Well, we couldn't have chosen a better day to see sand in motion. Often described as a sea of sand, the Alexandria dune field is approximately 80 kilometers long, about 4.5 kilometers wide at its widest areas, and it covers a total distance of about 15,500 hectares. It is continuously changing throughout the seasons. Now in winter it's predominantly our westerly or southwesterly winds, and the dune field is an important bird breeding habitat area. We have dune pockets of isolated vegetation patches where we're fortunate to have the endemic hairy-footed dune gerbil that assists with seed dispersal. We have the endangered oyster catchers and Damara terns nesting in season. In our summer months, we have the Siberian peregrine falcon that visits over summer. We've had various sightings of leopard on the dune fields. And it's also a very important aquifer area, large bodies of fresh water that is used to service the surrounding communities, as well as play an important role in the marine ecology.
This protected area is also home to many archaeological sites.
Right here we are at a cultural heritage site. It's an old shell midden. This one particularly dates back over 5,000 years. We have amongst us artifacts that some of them dated back 2,000 years. We know these dates from examining, if I look at this, a piece of pottery, we can see that it was fired and it was probably used to house water that the Khoisan used to travel with, which allowed them to stay on the dunes for longer periods of time while they were harvesting shellfish. They also brought, like this stone. This stone was brought to make tools. On the beaches we don't have hard igneous stones, we have mostly these sandstones. So these rocks were imported to the area that they used to travel with in order to try and make tools with them. In the later years we find fragments of bone which indicated small mammals. Either the Khoisan brought domesticated animals with them, or they hunted small mammals in and around the dunes and the thickets.
Bordering the dune field is the contrasting Woody Cape section, which also forms part of the Addo Elephant National Park. The Langebos huts are available to hikers on the 2-day Alexandria hiking trail, as well as those simply wanting an overnight stay in the forest. This forest was exploited until the area was declared a nature reserve in 1987. It now enjoys the highest level of formal protection under South African environmental legislation.
Yes, welcome back to the second hour here at the Newsroom, Jumbo Africa. I'm Elvis Preslin.
I'm Kendall Mahamat.
We'll be with you until 12 o'clock. Now we're focusing on the violence in KwaZulu-Natal. 3 family members have been shot and killed by unknown assailants in Folweni, south of Durban, over the weekend again, Kendall.
Now the death toll rises in KwaZulu-Natal, and all due to killings and murders.
So we're asking you that question on your screen right now. What could be the motive behind the rise in killings in KZN? That's the question. Let's take a look at what you're telling us.
Mr. Tavi Singh Aubrey 1 says positions and money only.
Matthew says political killings and higher unemployment rate that create crime.
Those are some of your comments. Please keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue. But we're also focusing on Parliament. They'll be sitting this morning with the public protector. They want to find out whether or not she is fit to hold office.
Yes, of course. There's been quite a lot being said in the press as well as elsewhere about her fitness to hold office, especially after the DA said that she sacrificed her independence when she consulted state security and the presidency about Absa and Bangkok. Now, that's very interesting, and we're asking this particular question.
Should the public protector continue to hold office? That's our question to you. So far, 259 votes in 22 hours left to vote. 73% of you in South Africa and the continent is suggesting that the public protector should not hold her office.
Yes, Nazim Grootboom says no, she must vacate the office because she doesn't do the job.
Lechasa says she is illegitimate. Those are your comments, straight to the point. But we're also asking about your sporting weekend. It was across all sporting fronts, from rugby to soccer to cricket, Kendall.
Absolutely, and we're asking this particular question with the performances that we had from our three national teams. What are your views? Phenomenal performances all around. Some tweets to share.
Yes. Wayne Lolly Yazi says, so I hear we only need 6 points from Senegal to qualify for 2018 World Cup. Is it possible? Anything is possible with hashtag Bafana Bafana. Yes, 2 wins. That's all it will take. 1 here in South Africa and 1 in Senegal.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Nazima comes through to us and says, a great performance by our national teams. They should keep that spirit. Hashtag Bafana, Protea Fire, Springboks, SABC News.
There's another one here coming from Tristy that says, Kagiso Radaba, 25. 100 test wickets already. Best bowler, Protea Fire. Such a talented player. He's 22, isn't he?
Yeah, he's 22 years old. He turns 23 on the 25th of May, 2018.
The youngest ever.
Very young man.
Absolutely fantastic. Keep it up. Right now, let's take a look at your news headlines. Retired Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke says his role as the arbitrator in the Life Esidimeni hearing is to determine an appropriate redress for the families. 3 family members were shot and killed last night by unknown assailants at Fulweni, south of Durban. This is the 3rd attack on families in KwaZulu-Natal in a week. And the North Gauteng High Court is expected to rule today whether India's Bank of Baroda can close the accounts of 20 companies belonging to the controversial Gupta family. Those are your headlines. And before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. Kendall?
Today we celebrate how well our national teams did over the weekend, and that's really what the sports is about, as well as a few other things that are of importance to sporting fans out there. But it's about these 3, Bafana, Springboks and Proteas. That's what's up. Good morning to you. You're watching Newsroom. This is what we've got for you in the sports today.
What a catch, and that's 100 test wickets for Kagiso Rabada.
22-year-old Kagiso Rabada's star continues to rise as he seals a resounding 2-0 Test Series victory for the Proteas over Bangladesh with his 3rd 10-wicket haul.
Youngest South African to 100 test wickets and the 5th youngest in world cricket. Take a bow, young man.
Yeah, onside here. Needing support, lovely play. Vilaghazi to make it 3. And in added time, South Africa rubbing salt in the Burkinabe wound.
Bafana Bafana wrest back control of their World Cup 2018 destiny with a masterful 3-1 victory over the Stallions of Burkina Faso.
The All Blacks are giving an inch. Springboks are still going strong. And
the Springboks put in a much improved performance to lose by a single point to the mighty All Blacks in their last Rugby Championship match for 2017. I'll have all this and more. I'll also be chatting to Manfred Sadler and Stephen Mokoka, fresh from the Durban 10K just over the weekend. All this and more at about 10:40. Do stay with Elvis as he's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this hour. 3 family members have been shot and killed last night by unknown assailants at Fulweni, south of Durban. Now, this is the 3rd attack on families in KwaZulu-Natal in a week. The families were traveling on the M35 when they were attacked from behind by suspects traveling in 2 cars. Other occupants of the car sustained serious injuries and were rushed to a nearby hospital. The motive for that attack is unknown. Meanwhile, 4 suspects have been arrested in connection with the murders of 5 people in Marion Hill, west of Durban last week. Some of the victims were handcuffed before being shot execution style. Police say an operation involving organized crime task team members and local detectives brought positive results. Now, to unpack the killings in KwaZulu-Natal, we are joined on the line by veteran KwaZulu-Natal violence monitor Mary de Haas. A very good morning to you, Mr. Haas, and welcome.
Good morning, Elvis and listeners.
Now, first and foremostly, 3 attacks in a space of in such a short space of time. Why are these attacks happening in KZN, specifically on families?
Oh, it's very difficult. The dynamics in these areas are quite different. Although, in Matamatolo, the dynamics are quite different to areas like Folweni or Marion Hill. In Matamatolo, for example, has got a history of attacks linked to disputes over land or taxi violence, but there's no telling in the case of the Matamatolo violence why grannies and children should be killed. Another possible explanation is witchcraft, but this is all allegations, but this is all speculation because we don't know. The Folweni and the Marion Hill killings, and it is good that there have been some arrests in the Marion Hill killings, but again, often arrests take place and, there's no court case or conviction. So we hope that the police have got a strong case in this matter. But in these cases, it's very difficult to assess what the motive is. It's only when more evidence comes out. People locally don't necessarily know why these things are happening. They certainly don't know why the Matamatolo killings took place. The possibility in both Marion Hill and Folweni is taxi related. But whatever the motive, it's a sign of the lawlessness in this province. There is basically a state of anarchy in this province. And what all these killings point to is the ready availability of guns and hitmen in the province. And extremely poor policing, because if men are, usually it's men, are running around armed, trained as hitmen, that's what crime intelligence is supposed to pick up. And, the fact is that this can happen under the noses of crime intelligence, which is supposed to be taking preemptive steps to stop this sort of thing happening. And detective services are also seriously problematic in the province in terms of the way they're managed. And that means that hardly any of these killers, whether it's political motives, taxi motives, personal vendettas, get brought to justice. So crime pays and crime continues. That you might say is a common denominator in all these killings.
Now, some have suggested that some of these killings could be politically related. Your thoughts on that?
To make any assessment of that, one would need a lot more information than is available at the moment. There was a lot of protest action in Folweni last year before the local government elections over choice of candidates, for example. So there are political dynamics. There's political dynamics in a lot of the areas around Durban, but it's a long shot to say that these could be politically motivated, because you would then have to look at how these people that died were related to politics. And even if they were related to politics and political disputes within their area or within their party, at a branch or wider level, then you still don't know. And it's the same with the politicians who get killed. In some cases, there's certainly evidence that the motive is political. But in other cases, one is not sure whether it's because they've got taxi interests or other business interests, or they're having a relationship with somebody's husband or wife. You know, these are always possibilities, and it gets back to what I said, that there are so few convictions, so we don't get to hear the evidence in courts. You can't really, you can only say probable. It's probably political. Yes. And in these cases, for Winnie or Marion Hill, for example, at this stage, to even make a suggestion of there being a probability that there were political links, one would need a lot more background information to make that hypothesis, you might say.
Mrs. De Haas, we need a lot more time to discuss this, but unfortunately we need to go to another event live, so we will chat to you shortly. That was the veteran KwaZulu-Natal violence monitor, Mary De Haas, chatting to us about the violence in KwaZulu-Natal. But right now, retired Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke says that his role as an arbitrator in the Life Esidimeni hearing is to determine an appropriate redress for the families. Let's go live there now.
Thank you, Counsel Yina.
Thank you, Justice. My name is Adila Hassan. I'm here today with my junior, Ms. Stein, and we are instructed by Section 27 on behalf of the families of 55 deceased.
Thank you, Advocate Hassan.
And we would need to address you on the issue of who we represent, if you will allow us that.
Advocate Krause, thank you. Excuse me, I will revert to you in a short while in order to allow you to deal with that. But first, from Council, I'd like to inquire whether there has been a pre-arbitration hearing held in this matter. And if so, and there's a signed minute, I would request that it be handed up to me, please.
Yes, Justice, there is a signed minute. It's being provided. I think Obaking will give us a signed minute just now. We'll provide it.
Very well. Arrangements should be made to have the minute handed up to me. It will become necessary to deal with the interlocutory issues, so I'd like it to be handed up to me so that we can get on with that.
Yes, Justice.
That then brings us back to the Legal Aid Board, Legal Aid South Africa, as I should say. Advocate Krause.
In number 7.
Again, let me say, Council must remember to switch on their mics, please, as they rise. And we have to decide whether you'd like to rise or sit, frankly. I'm quite comfortable that you sit if you choose to sit. It's going to be 3 weeks together. Do you choose to sit or stand? I'm more comfortable talking while standing, actually. It might be true of you too. But Council is welcome to do whatever they're comfortable with.
My court experience doesn't allow me to sit just yet. Maybe I will still get that right, Justice Moseneke. The Ombuds's recommendation in number 17 states that all affected people, persons and families must be engaged in this alternative dispute resolution. Now, I, together with my learned friend, Mr. Skibi, represent Legal Aid South Africa, as I indicated to you, and it's our belief that all persons fitting this description should be properly represented in this process. I believe the term alternative dispute resolution is now being changed to appropriate dispute resolution, and I submit that's something that we should keep in mind. But this alternative or appropriate dispute resolution process is before this forum, and there's currently no legal representation for the third group of people as per paragraph 2.3 of the entitlement criteria in the terms of reference. The third group is described in the terms of reference as Life Esidimeni mental health care users and their families who survived the Gauteng Mental Health Marathon Project, but who were caused trauma and morbidity inter alia. So that is the group that we would want to suggest that we represent. And by definition, and thankfully so, this is a much larger group than the other two groups. We know from the Ombuds report in chapter 12 thereof that at the start of this project there were 1,812 mental health care users at Life Esidimeni different facilities. And we also know, sadly, that about 100 of these mental health care users passed away. Therefore, this group that we propose to represent should be close to 1,700 people, and some 300 of them were children at the start of the project. Now, at this stage, we're not ready to give this forum any specific group of people we represent. We have people coming to us, but we don't have a proper brief. And the reason for this is we were only briefed on late Thursday, the 5th of October. And at the time available, we haven't been ready to put all the names together. But we've worked through all the documentation and we're ready to proceed if the court allow us. In our opinion, the survivors needs representation because they've suffered as a result of what I can only call a cattle drive, moved to the NGOs that was not registered and did not have the capacity or the expertise to deal with them and other deceased mental health care users. Now, according to the Ombuds report, these patients or users were involved in multiple moves, not only once, to other Esidimeni facilities and to other NGOs. And some of them were dumped at unregistered NGOs, had the trauma of seeing other mental health users waste away and even die at an alarming rate, and this must have caused anguish and trauma. Then the families also didn't know where they were moved to. And for such vulnerable persons as these mental health care users, even more so for the children, this must have caused a severe trauma. Now, at this stage, we are unable to place this larger group before this arbitration into subgroups, but we will hopefully be able to do that before the end of these proceedings. Now, issues that would play a role in the redress, maybe I should keep that open if you allow me for the opening address. But in our opinion, it would be just and equitable and appropriate if we will be allowed to continue in these proceedings, seeing that the parties clearly state in the pre-arb minute that they recognize the tragedy and the trauma experienced by the mental health care users and their families, and that the common goal will be a just, agreeable and expedient solution to be found. Now, at this stage, we're asking either to be acting in the position of a curator for this group and to act in their best interests, or in public interest to act on their behalf. And we submit that it will be in the arbitrator's powers to regulate this process and allow us to be part of this. Those are my submissions.
Very well. Let's start with Council with you are fully aware of the terms of reference which in fact are an arbitration agreement. Because arbitration is a matter of so the prerequisite for your participation. You are aware of the terms set of reference which in effect are an arbitration agreement, which really means that if you had to have more people who qualify in terms of 2.3 of the terms of reference, you would, at least on their behalf, acting as a curator at the stage until they're identified, should subscribe to and accept the terms and conditions of the arbitration agreement. And I'd like that to come quite clearly on record that you do. even on behalf of clients that you are yet to identify, because at this stage you're acting for a category of people rather than specified people.
The only issue that we did have with the terms of reference was one paragraph that seemed to suggest that the parties could come to an agreement outside the arbitrator's findings. That has been cleared up first, and we accept that the arbitrator will make any final decision and no agreement will be binding on the arbitrator. Insofar as that has been clarified, we will abide by the terms of reference, and we also accept the pre-trial minute, a pre-arbitration minute that was about to be handed to yourself.
Very well. That's a very important point. This is, let me again, for public interest of everybody, these are arbitration proceedings, which are a species of alternative dispute resolution. These are not mediation proceedings. And therefore, the outcome would be binding in the sense that, excuse me, the arbitrator is obliged to issue an award at the end of the process. And that award, as a force of law, unless for good reason, set aside in a review. So ordinarily, that would be binding on all the parties. So it's just important for all of us to get it quite clear. These are not mediation proceedings, they are arbitration proceedings. And therefore the outcome is binding. And that is why the arbitrator is at large to subpoena such parties as may be necessary in order to reach the truth that might be necessary to determine equitable redress anticipated in there. Thank you ever so much. I'm going to start with counsel for the state to respond to the submissions which were made by Legal Aid South Africa. And more particularly, whether you have any objections to their entry into these proceedings and representing survivors of what I would call the life Esidimeni trauma.
Thank you, Justice. On behalf of the government or the state, there is no objection to the legal aid entering into the proceedings on the condition that those people that they seek to represent, they fall within the category as identified in paragraph 2.3 of the terms of reference. Thank you.
It's your turn.
Thank you very much, Justice. We have no objection against the legal aid forming part of these arbitration proceedings. We do, however, note that in terms of the terms of reference actually excludes people, survivors from CCRC, that's the Cullinan Care and Rehabilitation Center, and survivors. And perhaps that should just be addressed perhaps between the parties at some stage, because there are also survivors that's been affected by this project. But perhaps legal aid can look into that and see whether or not they can broaden the scope of who they represent for the survivors there, and the parties can come to some agreement or arrangement on that at a later point in time.
Very well, thank you. Counsel from Section 27.
Thank you, Justice. The families of the deceased have no objection to Legal Aid South Africa being party to these proceedings and representing the survivors of this tragedy. The terms of reference in paragraph 2.3 already provide for the recognition and the representation of such people, and we appreciate the participation of Legal Aid South Africa.
Thank you. Very well. I think at this stage, as an interlocutory matter, we certainly, I direct that the Legal Aid Board may join these proceedings and to act for and on behalf of persons who are contemplated in paragraph 2.3 of the terms of reference. And the legal aid is required within a reasonable time and subject to directions of me as arbitrator, to provide such details and names of the parties as they come to ascertain, but they're otherwise entitled to proceed and act on their behalf until their full particulars have been ascertained and placed before the arbitration process.
Thank you, Justice. Just the name of our organization has changed. It's now not longer Legal Aid Board, it's now Legal Aid South Africa. Court, please.
Legal Aid South Africa, I apologize indeed. I will keep on calling you Legal Aid South Africa. Shall we then move on to the next part of this morning's proceedings? And these relate to some of the terms of the agreement, the pre-hearing agreement entered into by the parties. The first of those issues relate to witnesses and the order of giving evidence in these proceedings. It appears from the pre-hearing minute that there has been agreement in relation to this matter. And I'm going to require the state to be the first to address its position in relation to the agreement to be found in the minute. And more particularly about availability of witnesses by the state that relate both to the circumstances of death as well as the identity of the deceased and all survivors. Counsel for the state.
Thank you, Justice. As it has been recorded in the pre-up minute, the state would have two opportunities to address these proceedings. The first part being in relation to the circumstances, an explanation leading to the circumstances relating to the death of the mentally ill patients. And the second part will be in relation to the apology to be proffered by the state. With regard to witnesses, the state will call Professor Makhoba, who is the ombud in relation to which these proceedings have been initiated. And the second witness will be the Director General from the Office of the Premier, Ms. Pindile Baleni. And the next witness will be the Minister of Health, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, followed by the Premier of Gauteng, Mr. David Makura, as well as the current member of the Executive Council for the Department of Health, Dr. Gwen Ramokgopa. That will be the list of the witnesses and the sequence that will be followed by the state.
Thank you ever so much. Council, are there any responses from any of your colleagues? We now know what we didn't know before the start of the hearing. Starting with, for a change, I'm going to start from my left and go to the right. Legal Aid South Africa.
Thank you, Justice. We've got nothing to add at this stage. Thank you.
Counsel for Section 27.
Thank you, Justice. We, of course, like you, have only received this list this morning and this moment. We have a question of clarity, and that is whether these 5 witnesses will all be testifying before the witnesses of, before the families, or whether some are going to be testifying before the families and some will be addressing what needs to be addressed after the families give their evidence. That's the first. The second is that the...
Well, on the first question, Council, what is your submission?
Well, perhaps it's related to the following, the next submission I was going to make, which is that there isn't anybody on this list of government witnesses that was actually involved and present at the time that this happened. And at the very least, we would have expected that the former MEC for Health, Ms. Mahlangu, would be first of all, present throughout the proceedings in order to hear the testimony of the families and then to respond thereafter.
Very well. That's your submission on the first question. Do you want to go on to the second question?
No, those are the two. We have no view on whether all 5 of the current address these proceedings before the witnesses or after. The order is in the discretion of the arbitrator, of you, Justice Masaneke. But what we are concerned about is then who addresses the apology.
I'll go back to the State Council to respond to the matter. Of course, if any important witness is not on a list which is proffered by the parties voluntarily, and that's true of your clients of Legal Aid South Africa, or indeed of any other party, then it is open to the arbitrator or to any other party to require a subpoena to be sent out. So I'm just thinking whether we ought to debate now the list or rather look at the gaps and decide whether in fact there ought to be a request for a subpoena should there be gaps that are material. Is there anything you want to say about that?
My apologies, I should have addressed that at the outset. One of the reasons that the pre-arbitration hearing meeting recorded the need for the exchange of the list of witnesses by the 27th of September 2017 was in order for the parties to be able to identify those gaps and to request the voluntary appearance of witnesses, and if not, seek a subpoena. In the case of the families and the clients that we represent, we would be seeking a subpoena in relation to the former MEC in the event that she does not respond positively to an invitation to appear.
Very well, thank you. Counsel, your submissions.
Thank you very much, Justice. Justice, we share the same sentiments of Section 27 in respect of the witnesses and the late submission of the list of witnesses from the state. More specifically, Justice, I think we need to look at the terms of reference of this arbitration proceedings. What's important of the terms of reference is the fact that the aim of this arbitration is to seek to get closure and redress for the family members. And it's set out in paragraph 6.3.1 of the terms of reference, and that will be achieved by receiving the appropriate, paragraph 6.3.2, by receiving information to affected families regarding the circumstances and cause of death of their loved ones, as well as the location. Now, Justice, we do not see in this list of witnesses any of the people that can testify as to what happened. And in the case of the family members which we represent, the people at CCRC, which is the Cullinan Care and Rehabilitation Center, we do not see a CEO, we do not see a chief of staff, we do not see any witnesses who the state intend to call to come and clarify and explain to these families why their loved ones died, why their loved ones wasn't provided with food and water. And that is the essence, and I submit is the purpose of this arbitration, to get clarity on what happened. That is the only way that we will get closure. So, just to the extent that my learned colleagues will argue that we can issue subpoenas, just as the fact is that these patients were transferred from one NGO to another NGO back to the state, there was no consistency of personnel. So they cannot come up with a list of people to say we should subpoena these individuals. So I would invite my colleagues to provide us with a list of the employees of the specific NGOs, as well as the CCRC specifically, and then we can indicate who we should subpoena from there to come and testify.
Very well, we'll get a response from the state in a moment. But again, remember that once parties give lists, if there are vital gaps in the rendition of evidence, it is open to the parties to point that out. And it is open to evidence leaders who I have appointed for the very reason that there may well be gaps in things that I, as arbitrator, would like to hear, which none of the party raises. In which event then there's a facility to get the evidence leaders to bring that evidence in addition to what the parties themselves might have done. So the idea was to make sure that all bases are covered. We'll get back to the state where they want to do it voluntarily, but if you want more, you have to ask for more, and I suggest the parties do it timelessly. Give notice, I would like to have the Sea of Life Esidimeni, or I would like to have the head of the mortuary at a certain place, but we have to specify what we need beyond the lists that might be brought before us. And as you make submissions, of course, the state understands what you're saying, and they can embellish and amplify their list as we go on. But I'm going to go back to counsel for the state. What are your responses to submissions that were made on this particular issue, i.e. the selection of witnesses?
Thank you, Justice. First, I would like to deal with the categories of the witnesses. As I have addressed these proceedings, the first two witnesses will be giving an explanation of the circumstances leading to the death of the patients. And the first witnesses being Professor Makhoba, and the second being Ms. Pindile Baleni. And those will be the witnesses who will testify before the family members could take a stand. The remaining three witnesses, being the minister, the premier, and the current MEC, will testify after the families have been given an opportunity to present their situation. That is the sequence in respect of which witnesses will be led.
Counsel, what is your response to the to the submission that the state ought to be proactive and bring people who would have first-hand knowledge of the circumstances of death? Or do you think Professor Makhoba's evidence will be sufficient in that regard?
On that aspect, if I can take the justice to the minute which was agreed on amongst the parties, particularly...
Which paragraph?
Paragraph 15.1. Paragraph 15.1 dealt with issues relating to witnesses, which recorded that in the event of any of the parties requiring any particular witnesses, such parties should take urgent steps to issue the necessary subpoenas of those witnesses that are sought to be called. And it was incumbent upon the parties to follow that process. And that procedure is available in these proceedings. Subpoena proceedings could be followed, and that was also repeated in the correspondence exchanged between the attorneys on behalf of the government to the attorneys to Section 27 wherein it was repeated that should they require specific witnesses, they will then have the opportunity, they should actually proceed to subpoena those witnesses. We are not objecting to the subpoena of any of the witnesses. They are at liberty to follow that process, and we will not stand in the way of those witnesses being brought before these proceedings.
Very well understand. Of course, the state could facilitate that and do it, but you're really saying, look at the agreement in 15.1, and the parties must follow the agreement, which is to subpoena whoever they might want to have in addition to what you will be bringing in. Will they always know who was, for instance, in charge of Life Esidimeni at the time of the transfer, or who would have been responsible for specific incidences of death, or who had a generic duty? Will they always know, have the information available? Or should the state be facilitative in terms of the arbitration agreement?
Well, like in that regard, if there are any difficulties in identifying specific individuals and the information which is within the knowledge of the state will be able to assist. But the fact of the matter is that the party who seek a specific witness will then have to take appropriate steps. We will facilitate, we will assist where we can in terms of giving information which is within the state's knowledge.
Very well, thank you. We've just listened to submissions here on, firstly, the availability of witnesses, and the state has provided us with a list of persons who they intend to call. The second subsidiary question was raised was the rest of the parties seems to want more witnesses than those which are listed by the state currently. And the response of the state at this stage is to look at the pre-hearing minute and 15.1 of the minute in particular. And it seems to me that the vehicle open to the parties would be one of subpoena, unless there is any ground shown why that would be prejudicial to the parties. And it does appear that the matter was discussed between the parties, and they seem to have agreed that they would alert my office of witnesses they require and identify them. And where these have not been fully identified, the state will be obliged in terms of the arbitration agreement to provide details of these witnesses. And we, the parties, would then have to resort to a subpoena process. So I'm not going to hear further submissions on this interlocutory issues. Again, it does, as I say, the parties would require to give the office of arbitrator early notice of the part they require over and above the evidence that is going to, the state is tendering. The state is also, the second aspect of this, intend to have two parts to the evidence leading, which is to have first the factual data, and then followed later then by the sections and evidence on remorse, which will be given by political leaders. And I think, for my part, it makes ample sense that they be called later after the evidence that would have been led by the rest of the parties, rather than at the beginning. So as things are now, essentially that would be the ruling. One, we're going to proceed with the witnesses that the state has listed. Two, parties to these proceedings can resort to the procedure anticipated in paragraph 15.1 of the pre-trial minute, i.e. to identify parties they seek to be compelled to come and appear. the state's attitude being they will support and help, but they are not themselves going to compel or require any of the witnesses to come without subpoenas. I think that is quite clear. Subject to any submissions by counsel, I'd like to move off this particular aspect.
Justice, my apologies, just one brief comment on that. Can we get the undertaking from the state in respect of the family members at CCRC that they will provide us with a list of the employees at CCRC at the time of this tragedy, so that we can know and identify the individuals to be subpoenaed? Because as I indicated, the patients are not, and the family members cannot and do not know all the employees at CCRC. And it's not possible for us to issue subpoenas for people we don't know, but somebody needs to come and give clarity.
Counsel for the state, you want to respond to that?
What my learned friend seeks is information relating to people that do not fall within these proceedings. And at the beginning, he outlined, or he has given a list of the people that are being represented, and being 3 of those people who have been affected. So the state cannot divulge information of those people that, like, they are not representing.
I would like the parties, the 2 parties concerned, to engage each other on this matter and to revert to me in chambers about a possible resolution of the matter. But I don't want you to stand in the way of a pre-existing arbitration agreement. So I urge the parties to engage each other and revert to me in chambers, naturally in the presence of all other parties, so that we can try and advance that matter. Very well? Good. Shall we move on then to the next issue, which appears to have been resolved more than at the beginning, the record. The pre-trial conference, the parties had agreed on a record, its preparation.
I beg your pardon, Justice. I just wanted to get clarity with regard to the evidence that will be led on behalf of the state. As a matter of fact, the state has voluntarily engaged in this process, and the proceedings is, to the extent that it's an arbitration, but these proceedings are not supposed to be adversarial in nature, such that witnesses will have to be cross-examined. I just wanted to get clarity or direction from the justice as to whether the evidence that will be led, or the witnesses who will be led on behalf of the state, will they be subjected to cross-examination, and if so, will the same apply to other witnesses?
Have the parties dealt with this matter in their pre-hearing meeting?
The matter was not dealt with, and it's a matter which we had reserved for direction from the justice.
Take me to the part of the minute that deals with the hearing and the procedure during hearing. It seems to start from paragraph 13, isn't it?
Yes. And paragraph 17 only makes reference to the fact that witnesses will give evidence under oath or affirmation.
Well, I'll hear submissions from the other parties, but frankly, Witnesses are witnesses. Once they go under oath, they submit to cross-examination, unless there's a compelling legal reason why not. Is it your submission that there ought to be no cross-examination?
Regard being had to the spirit with which these proceedings are being conducted, and the main objective being to find closure and address the aspect relating to compensation. The parties should not be seen to be in a combative mode, trying to battle it out, as it will not be ideal. The outcome of these proceedings should be a win-win situation for everyone. There shouldn't be a winner, there shouldn't be a loser. The government, having taken responsibility, comes to these proceedings willing to divulge as much information as possible in order to assist and facilitate this process.
Yes. I think the agreement talks to the fact that the parties come here in good faith and they seek to find equitable redress, which includes closure. And I think the parties have agreed that that would be the primary purpose of these proceedings. But let's take a step back. In order to be able to determine equitable redress, do you think evidence ought not to be tested? Should there be no questions whatsoever to any witness that might testify? Is that the submission?
Well, the approach that we suggest is that in the event of any matter which may require clarity, such witnesses will obviously have to be questioned. All that I submit is that clarity-seeking questions should be distinguished from cross-examination. And it is not the intention of the state to cross-examine the affected family members. That is the spirit with which these proceedings are being approached.
But at the core of it, you don't object to questions being posed to witnesses, do you?
On points of...
You're concerned about whether the questions are combative or not.
Indeed, Justice.
I understand that. Thank you. Again, we'll go around and have responses to other counsel on the matter. Again, another interlocutory question. Shall I start with Legal Aid South Africa?
I think paragraph 22 of the pre-op minute deals to the extent that questions might be asked. Insofar as witnesses are always, in my opinion, treated with respect and sensitivity, and we always hope that they will treat us also with respect and sensitivity when we ask them questions. But of course a witness can't not be questions. Whether we call it cross-questioning or whether we call it cross-examination or whether we just call it questioning, we won't have a proper picture before this court unless we can ask questions to the witness. And of course it will be with respect and sensitivity.
Very well, thank you. Counsel for Section 27.
Thank you, Justice. It's paragraph, there's a section on questioning of the witnesses in the pre-arb arbitration minute, starting from paragraph 20 and going to paragraph 23. And in paragraph 23, it is stated that witnesses called by the government and expert witnesses may be questioned by representatives of other parties and evidence leaders. It seems to me that this is a bit of a storm in a teacup, that in fact we did deal with this. It was a tricky issue during the pre-arbitration because of the family members who are testifying. And on behalf of our clients, there are some who have chosen to be present and to provide oral testimony and to tell their stories and to make themselves vulnerable to this hearing. And there are others who have provided their versions via affidavit. And so it was with due regard to those circumstances that this discussion took place, and these paragraphs recorded the agreement, and I think they speak for themselves.
Yes. Evidence Leader Counsel, Alfken Guchana, what is your say? You were present at this meeting.
Yes.
And what's your view of paragraph 23?
Paragraph 23, Justice, let me provide a brief background to why the word clarity was used there in paragraph 22. That is in relation to the families. Sorry. In relation to...
Just speak volubly, just have regard to all the interested parties in here.
Yes.
Just speak loudly and clearly.
Yeah. In relation to paragraph 22, the background why the word clarity was used coming out of the meeting was that Section 27 did indicate that the families of the deceased are quite sensitive, and we need to be sensitive to them, I think, when they do come here. And we agreed as the parties meeting that is on the 22nd of September that that will be the spirit within which we'll approach this. But insofar as paragraph 23 is there, it speaks for itself. Nothing else was discussed about that.
The point is a bit nuanced. It says that these proceedings are not meant to be formalistic or combative.
Correct.
Is there any disagreement about that?
No, there's no disagreement about that, Judge. But but the agreement is that those witnesses which will be called by that is by government would be questioned by the parties or by the other parties. That was the agreement. And in paragraph 22, it's clear that was agreed that is by the parties. The background is, as I explained, that there was a request on behalf of the families by Section 27 that we're dealing with a sensitive matter, and the families are still grieving. We need to be sensitive to that.
Very well. And Counsel for the State, you have the last word on this. Is there anything else you want to say in the light of the responses of your colleagues?
Indeed, Justice. One aspect which will then relate to the question of honors. To the extent that the parties have agreed that given the nature of these proceedings being of its own kind.
It's honors a new question. It's a new point you're making, are you?
No. Like it is in response to the submissions made that there is a need for cross-examination of witnesses. What has been agreed upon was that the state will commence the proceedings. In ordinary course, the claimant will have the duty to begin and the honors of proof. But in light of what the nature of these proceedings are, we have agreed that the state shall commence in order to give that explanation voluntarily and in good faith. And that being the case, it was not anticipated that this process will be adversarial, because if that was the understanding of the parties...
Is it adversarial? Is it? Why do you think it is? And what do you say about paragraph 23? Remember, I invited you to take me to the part that deals with us, and you referred me to a part that was not quite relevant. I'd like to move on. It's really not a earth-shattering point, this. I'm giving you an opportunity, as I'm duty-bound to hear you on what you say paragraph 23 means. Witnesses by the state will submit to questions. That's what it says. Why is that not appropriate?
I have made the submission that the state does not have any objection when questions are being sought in order to clarify matters. Those are the submissions.
Is there any other issue you'd like to make on this? No.
No.
No. I think it is fairly clear the agreement between the parties is to be found in the section on questioning of witnesses, and I think these proceedings will adhere to the agreement as set out in paragraphs 20 through to paragraph 23. Having said that, again, this is an alternative dispute resolution process. Its aim is not formalism as might be found in some court proceedings. The agreement is quite clear. We're dealing with death, we're dealing with pain, we're dealing with trauma. And the idea is not to be smart and legalistic as lawyers often want to be. The idea is to get to the truth as efficiently and as timeously as we can. And again, I commend the state for being part and agreeable to this process, which will accrue to the benefit of those who might have been victims. And in that spirit, we must continue to go through this and find candid and honest answers so that we reach the pain and we try and resolve it. And up to now, the state has been a valuable partner and must continue to be such a partner to the end of this process. And therefore, the ruling simply on the interlocutory matters is that the proceedings will be conducted in terms of paragraph 20 to 23, amongst others, of the pre-trial minute. That gets us to the record. That's where we were about to go when you raised this matter of questioning of witnesses. Are there any issues that are still outstanding about the record? I've seen the minute, I've seen the timelines, and I'm aware that not all of the timelines were met. I'm aware that the record has been filed because there is one in my chambers, and which appears to have been properly paginated and appears to be a useful record. Are there any further submissions around the record? And I would like to hear parties. Again, I'm going to start from my left.
Thank you, Justice Mseneke. We don't have any commentary at this stage. We accept the record. We've read through it. Thank you.
Dr. Hassan.
Thank you, Justice Mseneke. In fact, maybe the appropriate place to begin is to point out that the one part of the record, right at the very beginning, the annexes to the Ombuds report, has not been included in its complete form. There are pages that are missing, and the order is also incorrect. We have made copies of the annexes as they are found in the original Ombuds report. We'd like to hand it in to you and to the other parties.
Obakeng, there's supposed to be somebody who's like an orderly here who disappears from time to time. Can it be handed up to me, Obakeng? Thank you.
You have a copy, okay. The second issue is in relation to documents that had been requested by Section 27 for inclusion in the record. The request was made in writing on 8 September 2017. There were repeated follow-ups culminating in the pre-arbitration pre-arbitration meeting, in which it was agreed that those documents would be provided to Section 27 by 27 September. There are still a number of documents that are outstanding. These relate to the service level agreement with Life Esidimeni, the report by a consultative organization called Health Advanced Institute on compliance with the service level agreement with Life Esidimeni, a report by KPMG on compliance with the service level agreement with Life Esidimeni, all the planning and budgeting documents used or prepared by the Gauteng Department regarding its contract with Life Esidimeni in 2015 and in 2016, the full record of the decision of the Health Ombud, all post-mortem reports, and all assessments of the NGOs prior to licensing those NGOs. Apart from this last mentioned category, the assessment of NGOs and the licenses, in respect of which some documents were provided, none of the requests for the other documents has been addressed by the state. We would request that those documents be made available to all the parties and to your good self without delay.
The list that you have read out now, the deficit in the light of the record, which is 3,500 pages already, is that what is...
Indeed. Those are not reflected in the record at all, and they are documents which we consider, we appreciate the hefty tomes that we have before us, but we think that this hearing and the full disclosure of what took place would not be complete without these documents.
Very well, thank you. It's your turn, Counsel.
Thank you very much.
Before I go ahead, Evidence Leader, is there anything that you would like to, Counsel, that you'd like to say in relation to the record in particular?
Justice Musanaka will defer to the state. There's nothing for now to add on that. Some of those requested documents, we've tried assisting the parties to obtain them from third parties.
Again, you'd have to speak into the mic and loudly.
I'm sorry.
Remember that it's also a broadcasting system, so
I'm sorry.
Everybody needs to hear you. Yes.
I'll bring it closer to me.
Yes.
No, I'm saying that in relation to the documents, I'll defer what the state would say. We have tried as evidence leaders to obtain or source this information from third parties, that is from government, specifically the project leaders and so on, with whom we had been in contact from the onset.
Well, whatever you have sourced must be part of a common record, isn't it?
That's correct.
So what are the plans? How are you going to get those to become part of a...
They've been promised by the evidence, that is project leaders, but we have not yet obtained them, so they are still looking for them. So, but we'll defer, I think, to what the state would say about the record.
Very well. Counsel?
Thank you, Justice. Justice, similar as Section 27, our attorneys have written a number of letters requesting documentation from the state. However, we would limit the documents that we require from the state to the patient's files, the deceased individual's personal files, patient files, which we think is of high importance to these proceedings, because those patient files will tell us what happened to these patients before their death. Were they provided their medicine, were they taken to hospital or doctors? We need those patients' files. That is not, according to me, a debatable issue. We need those files. And secondly, the autopsy reports of some of these family members, of some of the patients that died. The family members would like to see those reports, and I think this provision is made for that in terms of the terms of reference of the arbitration proceedings.
Very well, thank you. Counsel for the state.
Thank you, Justice. I should indicate that the state has provided the documents which were in its possession. And with regard to the other documents which have been requested, there has been a response to the request in relation to those documents. And such a response, the response was that the state was facilitating to obtain some of those documents, as some of the documents are with other institutions. For instance, there is a request of post-mortem reports, and it is common knowledge between the parties that those documents are with the SAPS and the NPA. There has been engagement which the state has initiated in order to ensure that those documents are made available. It is not to be portrayed that the state is refusing to make documents available.
Very well. Well, the state can't refuse because it has already made an agreement to provide the documents, right?
Indeed.
So we must just manage the process. I don't want to be caught up in legalities which unduly. There's an agreement, a pre-existing agreement in terms of the arbitration agreement that the state will provide all the information that is relevant to this tragedy. You have done so from the volumes that have reached me. As I say, there are 3,500 pages of documentation provided by the state. So I would like a process, uncomplicated, counsel, where again, Section 27, and indeed any of the other parties give us a list of those documents which are seen to be not available in the record. And there must be documents, necessarily relevance come into it. We may be curious about many things that happened, but there must be documents that have relevance over equitable redress, and not every curiosity that we might have. That is quite important. And the state must then look at the list, and indeed, if it is relevant, the document is relevant, the state is obliged to provide it. Just that uncomplicated, because there's such an agreement which the state voluntarily entered into with all of the parties. If there's any unreasonableness and the state feels the requests are unreasonable, it will become another interlocutory matters. Lawyers are used to this. We'll come into a huddle and see whether or not they're in fact entitled to the documents that they require. And I'll be required to make a ruling on whether or not the documents ought to be provided. In other words, simply whether the documents are relevant to the issues under dispute. We're going to leave it at that point. To wrap up, the state is going to, all the parties are going to give the state a list of what they say are documents which have not been provided yet. And within a reasonable time agreed to by the parties, those documents should be made available. And so to me, I would like to read them. And if there is a dispute over what is still outstanding, must be brought to my attention, and I'll make a decision on whether or not those documents ought to be granted. I see no further hands or any indication of any counsel wanting to speak. I'm going to then move on. I'm going to, at this stage, take the tea break. It's going to be for 30 minutes. Before I do so, I'd like to remind all parties that when we come back, we expect counsel to be ready with their opening statements. And each of our counsel will have to make an opening address, which lawyers know quite well, but which also helps everybody who sits in here to understand what each party seeks to do in these proceedings. That's what opening addresses are about. It's a lot of words by lawyers telling you what they plan to prove and to achieve in a particular tribunal or proceedings. So that will be a nice summary of what you expect from each of the parties. And after that, we'll then get into the details. And as I understand, the first witness will be Professor Makoba. Is that so? Very well. And immediately after that, we'll have the Ombud, who unearthed all of this, to come and be the first witness in the matter. It is 11:15. We will resume at 11:45. To all of our guests and members of the public who are here, I request that you allow me at least to leave the hall in some relative silence, and thereafter, hopefully, counsel will find their way out of here. It's just basic manners for me to evacuate here, and then we can, and we'll try and do that for all the 3 weeks. I thank you. The proceedings are adjourned till 11:45.
Well, that's the public hearings there, led by retired Judge Moseneke. Right now, let's go over to the Pan-African Parliament.
On behalf of our Excellency and friend, President of Chad, bonjour, Mr. President of Parliament, speakers of national parliaments present here, Your Excellency, honorable ministers, honorable deputy ministers, excellencies, ambassadors and high commissioners, members of the Pan-African Parliament, members of the diplomatic corps, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm humbled to be afforded this opportunity on behalf of His Excellency Jacob Zuma, the President of the Republic of South Africa, to welcome you back home. Our home, your home. For if it was not for the struggles of the people of this continent, there would be no free South Africa. The evidence is for all to see. And maybe many, even in South Africa, have forgotten that the real South Africa is 23 years old, 23. But the spirit of Pan-Africanism of the people of South Africa and our region is 105 years old. The ruling party in this country that struggled for more than 80 years is, or has just celebrated its 105th birthday in January this year. So when fellow African men, women, young people make a call to South Africa, we sometimes forget we are 23 years old and react as you expect of us, as if we are that great tree that is unshaken by its Pan-Africanism, like our president, as he's just been bestowed this honor. In South Africa, I would have said a baobab tree, but President of Parliament told me that tree is stronger than the baobab tree, and I will faithfully deliver the message. I said, welcome home to do what you do best. I also want to take this to extend a special word of welcome to His Excellency, President Brahim Ghali, the President of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, to your second home, South Africa. Warm greetings, Your Excellency, from your brother and from all South Africa, from every province and every corner of this country. Your Excellencies, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the new members of the Pan-African Parliament and wish them well as they begin their tenure. Your fresh ideas, Excellencies, rich and varied skills will complement the experience of the honorable members who have been in the service of our people in this Pan-African Parliament for a while. The African Union requires strong organs in order to achieve political, economic integration in our lifetime and beyond. Your commitment to the functioning of this continental body is commended and highly appreciated. Mr. President, it is our collective responsibility to ensure that the Pan-African Parliament is beneficial to all the continent's people. South Africa, as the host seat for the past 13 years, will continue to create enabling and conducive environments for the successful holding of sessions of this Parliament of our people across the continent. This is not without challenges. As I said earlier on, you were there when we said we are products of our people's selfless struggles and the products of international solidarity. And there was no international solidarity and sacrifices that would have started with fellow Africans like you. So this is a young institution, 13 years old, in a 23-year-old country. So we are going to journey together and make this institution a success. Honorable members, excellencies, Mr. President, South Africa remains committed to the strengthening of continental bodies. Its organs and mechanisms aimed at integration, sustainable development, attainment of peace and security is at the forefront of our objectives. We are committed to the goals we have set, in particular, as Your Excellency, Mr. President had said, harnessing our youth dividend, as we are a youthful continent. I have 5 of those types in my house, so I know what I am talking about. The only thing I keep reminding them is that they can be above 18 outside the home, but at home I'm older, so they need to walk straight inside my house. So they have been behaving well so far. But we can do them a favor and unleash their potential if we indeed, in line with our 7 aspirations that are embodied in the Agenda Africa 2063. Paramount to this is by silencing the gun by 2020. We will no longer have women and children carrying their belongings on their heads and running to nowhere. Enough is enough. While we have recorded some successful movement in a positive light in the past, more must be done in pursuit of our shared continental vision and the trajectory as encapsulated in our Agenda 2063. We therefore believe that the continued implementation of our regional and continental mechanisms and protocols should be guided by the aspirations espoused in Agenda 2063 through firm and unwavering commitments. Your Excellency, Mr. President, A few months ago, I was sent to some meeting by His Excellency President Zuma to represent him. When I arrived there, there was some document circulating, and it had a title, Marshall Africa, something, something. So I called the host into a corner and said, you know, we have a very good bilateral relations, but this one, I don't want to embarrass you in the main hall. I am going to loudly say we don't know this thing. We know Agenda Africa 2063. So that document disappeared because it was how we should be helped to conduct our lives. I wasn't alone. I had the former Commissioner Maruping and a few others who said, Minister, you started, we'll support you. I said, no, let's start outside. Because typical of Africans, you can't start screaming in the room when you could have had an opportunity to say, this we don't know, outside. So we did that, and we promised that there will be no Marshall Africa anything, because we have the Africa we want encapsulated very well in Agenda 2063 with its 7 aspirations. We therefore believe that the continued implementation of our regional and continental mechanisms and protocols should be guided by aspirations espoused in this commitment we've made in Agenda 2063. The Pan-African Parliament is central in all these continental efforts and aspirations, and commitments shown by its members through their work cannot be overemphasized. Your Excellency, I am a former ambassador. I'm a former political activist. I'm a former ambassador. I'm a former provincial minister before I came to where I am standing. When I was sent to local government, I was asking myself, what have I done wrong? But I learned so much in 4 years that I couldn't have learned in a lifetime. Our people are their own liberators. I learned the usefulness of exchanging information on that which gets legislated in one assembly to the other. It goes a long, long way. This role you're playing of when you come back home, you share that which you learn from your brothers and sisters from other countries. No amount of this can fast track Agenda Africa 2063 than that. So in recognition of your work, I say I've done it before, I know it works. Model laws that we learn from each other and influence each other. This task you must never underestimate. With the example I was giving you, it was about local authorities and using model laws to move from one province to the next. Your Excellencies, honorable members, in recognition of the centrality of the role of the youth in our development and our theme, the Youth Fund was launched to assist in realism and actually finding this a realization in making sure that we get the Africa we want and that we harness our youth dividend. It has to start with us. This culture of starting something new, aspirational, and go around the world cap in hand, it doesn't make us very serious people. But if we say we want to harness the youth dividend and we all equally launch a fund as Africans, makes us more respectable. And I applaud you for this initiative, Your Excellencies. The African Youth Forum has now also been established during our AU Summit and will be an annual event that focuses on youth participation in Africa's decision-making processes for the continent's development. In this regard, the AU has placed the youth at the center of Africa's future. Our youth and today's society at large should actively participate in our efforts to build a peaceful and prosperous continent. We are confident that the Pan-African Parliament will continue to this on this policy objective, both in terms of Pan-African Parliament's substantive mandate and by providing opportunities to the youth in our continent. Our leaders have made a call for ratification of the revised Pan-African Parliament Protocol by all member states. The entry into force of the process will be an important step forward to strengthening of the Pan-African Parliament. The strengthening of our institutions must result in entrenchment of democracy, good governance, promote and protect human rights. There is no other uncle somewhere who's going to be doing this for us. We are going to do it the way we know how, because all the uncles who were asking us to mimic them seem to be struggling. So, black men and black women, you are on your own. Mr. President, honorable members, it is heartening to note that Pan-African Parliament is making its own contribution to the sustainable development and integration of our continent. The outcomes of your recent conference on political and socio-economic integration of the African continent are most welcome and will add more impetus on the efforts aimed at achieving the goals of integration. It is not the first time that the Pan-African Parliament had conceived forums to deliberate and strengthen African positions on the issues of continental importance. It has done so previously in cooperation with other AU organs and AU member states individually and collectively focus on this. So development partners found us at work. They did not find us with cap in hand to start things for us. Civil society organizations, even in our own countries, business in Africa has been good recipients of what is good. We should call upon them that there will be no development without them. The academia cannot be writing theses about what is not going right in Africa while they're not helping us on what can be done right. As you are aware, Excellency, Africa's development agenda can only be achieved with a peaceful, stable, favorable conditions that we all strive for. South Africa reaffirms its commitment to peace and security on the continent. Our involvement in peacekeeping missions and contributions or to efforts aimed at post-conflict reconstruction and development are evidence of the commitment to make and that we are making to achieve sustainable development on our continent. Pan-African Parliament is an instrument and an organ that enables us to ensure active citizenry and promote participatory democracy. Thus, active citizenry will not only assist us to realize Agenda 2063 vision, but will also go a long way in enabling us to achieve United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. After all, they were attained. 2030 Sustainable Development Goals were attained because Africa spoke with one voice, G77 joined in and spoke with one voice, then the world joined in and we unanimously adopted Sustainable Development Goals 2030. I wish to express my appreciation on behalf of the Sangam, our president, that Pan-African Parliament has recognized the central role of women and youth in search for the Africa we want. Mr. President, I am not a very young woman, but I have not come across any hungry man who, while looking for food, looks out for his father for something to eat. They all run to their mothers. So, because one hand cannot clap, two hands can clap even louder, and development can happen much faster if we release the potential of our young people in our respective countries. Let us continue to speak with one voice and say that a peaceful Africa is long overdue. I stand here before you as I conclude, Mr. President, assuring you that South Africa will do the best we can as we chair SADC, which we started in April, BRICS, as we start the beginning of this year. I've already received the chairship of the ministerial part from the minister from China. In October, we are chairing or hosting Indian Ocean Rim Association of Countries. We are still co-chair of FOCAC. We do all this in celebration of our foremost diplomat that we are celebrating the whole year here in South Africa. One, none other than Oliver Reginald Tambo. By the way, you are hosted by him as you sit around here, because if he was around, he'll be 100 years old on the 17th of October. Let me quote him just once on what he said at the Frelimo Pan-African Youth Conference, and I quote, "I think truly and lasting unity, as opposed to the unity we may seek at a given time for the achievement of a certain purpose, is one which is conceived on the basis of essential oneness of mankind, based on what we basically can do as a common and deal with the challenges as common human problems," I close quote. He epitomized what true diplomacy is. I am because you are. So that's why I opened on behalf of the President that as we wish you well on this 5th ordinary session, remember that you not only claim South Africa as your own. Like the Zambian says, don't feel at home, be at home. I wish you a very successful 5th session and fruitful deliberations. Bonjour, asante sana, siyabonga, kialeboga, have a pleasant day. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. Now, I wish to give the floor to His Excellency Kabade, President of the Parliament of Chad, and the representative of the President Idriss Déby Itno, the President of the Republic of Chad. You have the floor, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Honorable Roger Nkodo Dang, the President of the Pan-African Parliament, His Excellency Brahim Ghali, President of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, and His Excellency the Minister of International Relations and representative of President Zuma, President of the Republic of South Africa, representative of NEPAD, Excellency Arikana Oshubare, Ambassador representative of the African Union to the United States, Royal Highness King Bugani III Amahulubi Nation, Kingdom of Speaker of the National Assembly of the Gambia, High Commissioners, representatives of international organizations, regional and governmental organizations as well, honorable parliamentarians, distinguished guests, all protocols observed, ladies and gentlemen. His Excellency, the President of the Republic and Head of State, His Excellency Idriss Déby Itno, was invited by the President of the Pan-African Parliament to attend the solemn opening of the third ordinary session. And he is very honored. He asked me to convey to you his apologies for not being able to attend this session because of his commitments. He asked me to represent him, to convey to you his brotherly greetings, and to deliver his message of hope for African Renaissance. And this is his speech. Excellency Brahim Ghali, President of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of the Republic of South Africa, representing His Excellency President Jacob Zuma, President of the Republic of South Africa, honorable parliamentarians, distinguished guests, all protocols observed, ladies and gentlemen. This ordinary session of the Pan-African Parliament is taking place at a time when major challenges are facing Africa and becoming more complex. This imposes on us as leaders of Africa a collective effort to meet such challenges. We should recall that that by establishing the African Union, the heads of state and government decided to move into a new phase of socio-economic development, cultural development, and security development in our continent. The aim is to involve people in the making of their own destiny and their own development. This is a phase in the creation of the United States of Africa that should enable us to pull together our intellectual and material resources in order to overcome the delay we have in all areas. The aim is to cut off the links of dependency, and this is making Africa a country of less influence in a world of trade interests and geostrategic dominations in the next years. The Pan-African Parliament represents our peoples, our peoples who aspire, like other peoples in the world, for peace, security, and political stability, and for socio-economic prosperity. Our peoples have to be in solidarity, to speak in one single voice, to be respected in the world. As we cannot end the wars that we are facing at the moment, and when we can't produce a common front against terrorism and violent extremism by having the means to overcome the forces of evil in the Sahel, Somalia, Libya, and the Lake Chad basin, when we look at the weakening of the Libyan state and the emergence of new hotbeds of political instability in areas that were stable, and when we see that African youths are dying in large numbers in the desert and in the Mediterranean in search for happiness in Europe and elsewhere, we have the feeling that we are going backward, and the hope we had in establishing the African Union to eradicate poverty, hunger, and security is not productive at all. Now, more than ever, the African Parliament should enable the continent to have the legal instrument and to move into action to achieve the proclaimed unity when the OAU was established in 1963 by the founding fathers of the OAU. It is high time that the African continent changes for the benefit of an economic and social integration at the regional and continental level by promoting the means of communication and by establishing criteria of convergence for harmonious socio-economic development and solid industrial development. We need to use our national potential to be able to create jobs, to reduce mass unemployment, and stop these perilous adventures. The populations of the African continent, on the basis of serious reports, will reach 1.5 billion people by the year 2050, and most of these people are young. In the face of this demographic growth, all major challenges will be there for the African continent, and we need to have the necessary resources in order to face major concerns such as food self-sufficiency, education and training for young people, the fight against pandemics, and the specific issue of women and girl education, and the gender approach for political participation in our continent. Here we hail the initiative made to call for a conference of women parliamentarians to address the main theme of benefiting from the demographic dividend by investing in youths. And we believe that this theme is very judicious. There is no doubt that during your debate you'll be able to identify the solutions to eradicate the negative practices that impede the full liberation of women.
We are still live at the Pan-African Parliament, but we're wrapping up on Newsroom. So what you can do is join us or continue watching the proceedings here at the Pan-African Parliament on YouTube. But we'll keep an eye out for you. The SABC crew is here. And what I can tell you that the Minister Mashabane, the Minister of International Relations, has already spoken. And the other speaker that many people will be wanting to hear is the President of the Arab Republic of Sahrawi that has issues with Morocco. It is